All right, so long division, what's your thoughts? Too long? Yeah, it's long. So there's a thing called synthetic. Synthetic means, well, I'm not sure exactly what synthetic means, but I think it has something to do with synthesizing, making things smaller, quicker. Either way, I'm going to show you synthetic now. So let me get your eyes back. Synthetic division, they call it these 4 steps. I use different steps. So my steps, I'm going to write a little bit different than this, but this is there in your packet either way to look at. Here are my steps as we go. Step number 1, using synthetic division. Again, synthetic is a shorter way to solve these. Step number 1 is I solve the divisor, solve d of x equals 0. So you can only do synthetic if you can solve the divisor for x. In this case, the divisor, d of x, is x minus 3. Are we capable of solving this for x?
Yes.
Yes. So you just take x minus 3 and say x minus 3 equals 0. How do you solve that? Plus 3. That's our first step right there. We solve the divisor is equal to 0. So we get x equals 3. All right, step number 2. On step number 2, I'll write it out as when we set up everything, we check for missing powers. And I'm about to explain what this means. Check for missing powers as you set up synthetic. Okay, so what do I mean by check missing powers? You look up here. So this right here is going to be our second step. You start with your leading term's power. The power is 5. What you need to make sure is you look across, you need to have every smaller power going down from the 5. So do I have a power of 4? Do I have a power of 3? 2? Do I have a 1, which means just an x without it showing a number? And do I have a constant all on its own? Okay, I have everything. If that's the case, all you do is you set up like this. You take your 3 that you're dividing by, and with synthetic division, you don't go up and over. With the division, you go down and around like this. And now you write out only the coefficients. So when I write out the coefficient 2, followed by -4, -3, -6, -5, and -8. Some of you may have done this in Algebra 2. Others did not. Just depends on your teacher. I'm going to leave a gap and then draw a line across. We're going to have to fill in numbers here, so make sure you leave yourself a space. From here, step 3. Step 3, call it following your mama. I'm going to write down mama. Yeah, you follow your mama. And we don't actually, well, you should follow your mama. That's the right thing to do, in general speaking. But what do I mean by that is this. After you drop down, you're going to drop down this number 2. Mama stands for multiply, add, and honestly, you're going to just keep on doing that until we finish this problem. So you start with m. What does m stand for in math? Multiply. What's 3 times 2? 6. Now that I've multiplied, you add these together. What's -4 plus 6? 2. That goes there. Now that you've added, you return and repeat. You multiply again. What's 3 times 2? 6. Now we add. -3 plus 6 is 3. Now we repeat. What's 3 times 3? 9. Now you add. -6 plus 9 is 3. Good. 3 times 3? 9. -5 plus 9 is 4. Y'all good. 4 times 3 is 12. Now we add. -8 plus 12 is 4. Now, the last number is always your remainder. Your remainder, you need to catch this, will never change. Now, this is important because there's going to be a 4th step where these other numbers can change. This part of the quotient can change. The remainder never changes. So is this a factor or not a factor? Not a factor. Would x equals 3 be a 0 or not a 0? X equals 3 is not a 0. Okay, so to finish up synthetic, there's a 4th step. Step 4. I usually write it right up here. Step 4 is you divide the quotient by whatever coefficient is in front of x right here. In this case, how many x's do I have? Just right there. I just have 1. So everything would get divided by 1. And the other conversations, can we rein those in? Thank you. So all these would get divided by 1. When you divide by 1, though, does anything change? No. So this one, here's how our, I'll write it right here. Here's how our quotient will look. Hey, Mason, Angeli. Thank you. This started as x to the 5th. Whenever you do synthetic, you always drop 1 power down. So starting here, it'll be x to the 4th. So 2 divided by 1 is 2x to the 4th power. And then from there, each value drops 1 power. So that's a positive 2. So it'll be 2x to the 3rd power plus 3x squared. Notice I'm just dropping a power as I go down. Now I'm at this 3x to the 1st power. And finally, 4. That's my quotient. And again, the remainder is 4. Now, as you write that out, that's one way you could see an answer. You could also see an answer in this form right here. Let me redo. I'm just going to copy and paste. You could see an answer written like this, where you write out the quotient plus, and it'll be a blank over the divisor, and you would fit the remainder right there. What's our remainder? 4. You could see it written that way as well. Either one is a correct form of division. I'll just box this one up. But both are correct. Could you use the calculator on this problem? To use that calculator trick I showed you earlier? No. No. Keyshawn, why would that not work here? Because it's not a factor. It's not a factor. You're going to use a calculator. It has to be a factor. If it's not a factor, it will not work. Okay, I'm going to do another before I give you one to try. Part B. Step 1. What was step 1? Solve d of x equals 0. Okay, so here's my divisor. I'm going to take 4x plus 1 and set that equal to 0 and try to solve that. How can I solve this equation? We will divide in a second, but we can do something first. We subtract 1 from both sides. That's the opposite of plus 1. So 4x equals -1. And now divide by 4. Now, if you could use this as a fraction or a decimal, I'm going to use the fraction. But you could do it as -0.25 if you'd like. I'm going to use, for step 2 here, I'm going to use -1/4. Before I start doing step 2, you need to check if it has any missing powers. The leading term, it has a power of 4. Do I have a power of 3 present? Yes. Power of 2 present? Yes. Power of 1? Yes. And no x at all? Yes. Yeah. By the way, if you were missing something, you would just put a 0 as a placeholder. So here I have 8, sorry, I forgot to write the division. -1/4 is what x equals. That's what we're dividing by. And it's dividing into 8, 38, 5, 3, and 3. Skip a space, draw your line across, and now step 3. Step 3 was that acronym. What was the acronym? MAMA, which stands for multiplying, adding, so on. The 8 drops to start this equation, or start the process. 8 times -1/4. -2. It is -2. If you're not familiar with how fractions work, you multiply the numerator, divide the denominator. Just the 1. If you multiply just this 1, does that change the 8? 1 times 8? No. So I'm going to ignore the 1 here. What I'm going to be doing here is basically just dividing by -4. Because multiplying by 1 doesn't change it. So this one, I know it's kind of corny to say this, but instead of doing mama, it's kind of like we're doing dada. Because all we're going to have to do is divide by -4 each time. So what is 8 divided by -4? -2. -2. Okay, now I add. What's 38 minus 2? 36. 36, good. And now I did reload. Again, multiplying by 1 doesn't change it. So what is 36 divided by -4? -9, you got it. 5 minus 9? -4. And take my -4, again, multiplying by -1 does nothing. So what is -4 divided by -4? Positive 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. Here we go, reload. 4 divided by -4?
-1.
-1. 3 minus 1 is 2. The remainder will never change. So the step 4 I'm about to do, that does not change. So is this a factor or not a factor? What about a 0? Not a factor or a 0. It's not a factor or a 0. Okay, now step 4. This last one did not need, we didn't have to do step 4, nothing got simplified. Step 4 is when you divide by this number there. Step 4 is you take your quotient, or what looks like it's going to be the quotient, and you divide by this coefficient, which is 4. All my answers need to be divided by 4. And this makes sense. Let me write out the division of 4, and I'll tell you why this makes sense. Just think for a moment. If we tried long division, you would start with 8x to the 4th right there. 8x to the 4th divided by 4x. What is 8 divided by 4? 2. We should have a 2. Right now we have an 8 there. We don't have a 2, do we? So at the very end, and it must be at the very end. You cannot do it earlier. At the very end, you divide everything by that 4 that's located right there. So what is 8 divided by 4? 2. That's going to give us our 2. And something I forgot to write down here. This was a x to the 4th power. So when it drops, it becomes x to the 3rd power. So our quotient is 2x to the 3rd power plus, what's 36 divided by 4? 9. Good. And that'd be 9x squared. -4 divided by 4? -1. I don't need to write the 1 because I can just put -x. It's -1x. And then finally, 4 divided by 4? +1. Okay, and now the remainder is 2. If you're wondering, why does the remainder not get divided? Well, here's why. If I were to write it in the other form, if I were going to take that and write the answer in this form, what you would then do is say plus and have that fraction, and it would be in this step right here, where you write 4x plus 1, that the remainder actually gets divided. The remainder would get divided right there in this step. And so, whoops, that's supposed to be a 2, not a 4. Sorry. It'd be right there, it gets divided. So that's why you don't divide the remainder, because if you write it in this form, that's implying it's going to get divided right there. So that would be your answer. With that, I'm going to let you try your third DOL. DOL number 3.